jazz is many things, you know, and it's hard, obviously, to get. I mean, there is no definitive definition of jazz, but I think that you can speak about jazz in two ways. You can talk about jazz as a style and as a vocabulary, which is the language of jazz as it's developed over time, which includes all the different stylistic elements. It includes swing rhythms, blues, melodies and harmonies, you know, European harmonies, you know, Broadway show tunes and how they are incorporated by jazz musicians. It includes the language of improvisation as it developed over time, and it's an ever-expanding definition. That's kind of jazz as a style, as a vocabulary, which I think is the most debatable, because there are some people who are going to say, for example, that well, Weather Report isn't jazz because it lies outside of their stylistic definition of jazz. You know, some people who will say it is. But for me, the real essence of jazz doesn't have to do with the language and the idiom as much as it has to do with the spirit of the music and the essence. And for me, that spiritual essence has to do with improvisation. It's the spontaneity, it's the immediacy, it's the freedom of the music. And I think that because of that, I would define jazz as being free self-expression through sound. That's jazz for me.
Jazz. I call it American classical music, as you must know by now. That term is what Mr. Jamal started. I don't call it jazz. There are many definitions of jazz, and dictionary has one, not a damn thing to do with music. There's a piece of computer out there, a piece of software out called jazz. It has nothing to do with music. What we have done is sophisticated a very unsophisticated word. Because it was never the intent of whoever called it jazz for it to reach these plateaus. You know, Duke Ellington didn't call himself a jazz musician. John Coltrane didn't call himself a jazz musician. You have American classicists as opposed to European classicists. That's what it is.
Said that there is a direct line from the creator to the musicians to the people, you know, in this music that we call jazz. And you know, when I'm playing, you know, I just try to keep myself open to that, and I think that the other people in my group do as well.
for anything that sounds good. I'm for anything that sounds good and honest. Because I think we have a lot of stuff out there that just, to me, it doesn't feel real. And I think there's a real hunger for, that's why I think there's a big interest in traditional music and sort of going back to some of the older forms and mixing them up maybe with some electronic stuff. There's some of that going on too. I think younger people have grown up with electronic music in their head from the time they were born. Unlike me, I grew up with acoustic music, you know, unaccompanied voice even. So my ears, the depth and breadth of what I understand as good is a little different from someone who was born in the, you know, 70s or 80s. And I think anything that can come together and combine to make something interesting and beautiful, whether it's electronic music, whether it's unusual instruments, native instruments from different cultures, whether it's the blending of creative ideas, is good. It's good for the music, and it's certainly good for us as a planet, even. I think that's, if you want to say, talk about the future of this music, I think the rhythmic ideas that we incorporate as the world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, that's where the future of this music is going. And not just jazz. You'll hear instruments, traditional instruments from Australia and from, you know, drums from all over the world, different drum traditions being incorporated and woven into all kinds of stuff, and I think it's a very, very good thing, a very healthy thing.
Well, I like the sound of the DJs. I listen to a lot of hip hop. I didn't want to have any rappers on this project because everybody does, you know, a rapper. We wouldn't do a typical hip hop thing, so we'll call a rapper to do it. So I said, okay, I won't do that. What's left? The DJ doing this very percussive scratching sound. When we play an instrument and you hear another sound, you play, it's like having a conversation with somebody. You know, a sax and a trumpet, they play a certain way together. A sax and a trombone, they play a different way. Sax and turntables, they play a different way. So for me, it was allowing me to play and hear music in a different way. And that's why I had to incorporate the DJ. He also, visually, is a different thing to look at. You know, when you see a guy with two turntables, a lot of people don't know what he's doing. But once they feel it, you know, and that's a lot of times what jazz is, the mystique of what's going on, the technical aspects.
Jazz is not supposed to sit. And jazz has always utilized new available technology. You know, for instance, it was jazz that introduced all this electricity. It didn't come from rock and roll. Rock and roll, what introduced electricity into the music was the electric piano. That made it available up and down the spectrum of musicians. And that came from jazz. You know, jazz is the music that has always fed popular culture in terms of music. Whether you're talking about the sound of the hi-hat, which is so dominant in pop and funk today, that comes out of jazz. You know, when you talk about all the things all the sounds that we hear that were pioneered by people like George Duke, people like Joe Zawinul and Weather Report, you know, so the music is supposed to expand, you see, and there are some that are now offended because we've got some new things to add, you see, and that's all it is, it's just new things to add. So now we got scratching. We didn't have scratching. We don't know what Duke Ellington might have done with scratching. We don't know, because his ears were gigantic. And when you listen to the body of his work, he did so many things, I think Duke Ellington might have found something to do with that sound. You know what I'm saying? So we can't be so quick to reject the new. We're supposed to embrace the new, you see? So everything that's going on, my father used to say, everything is going on all the time. And he was serious, and it is. And we're supposed to enjoy that. So I'm having a ball, listening to all these young players, listening to all the new sounds, the new rhythms, the new attitudes. I mean, we don't know what it's supposed to be, because it's supposed to be changing into something new all the time. You know, it really goes to the root philosophy underneath the music, you see? And those that resist, and those that are rigid, and those that want to remain fixed, do not understand the philosophy. And it's remarkable that so many of those who want to remain fixed clothe themselves in the masters. And the masters were not fixed. It's a remarkable, you know, the people are strange. You do, however you do it, you know, I believe that you should do it, you know, to the fullest. I believe that, you know, whatever, if you're using a DJ, if you're playing fusion, or if you're playing an avant-garde or bebop or swing, whichever, it's very important to, you know, put your all into it. So, you know, I believe that, I mean, I'm not opposed to playing in that style. I mean, I've done it a few times with Branford Marsalis and sitting in with different groups, and I made some recordings with some R&B and hip-hop artists, and I think that that's a part of the music too, so just stay open, you know.
About Dizzy Gillespie. I mean, you know, the
one of the founding fathers of bebop. But then he wanted to include he loved dealing with a lot of the Cuban rhythms, and he would start to include that in what he does. You know, Miles Davis. I mean, they thrived on the freedom of doing just what they want, and so this society, we're not living in a 1930s, 40s, 50s society, and so the music will definitely be representative of what's going on at the time. So if a person feels that using electronic instruments or whatever is how he or she can express oneself, then hey, that's what it is. Jazz is about finding out who you are, you know, being free to express that. And if that is the way someone wishes to express themselves, if that is what their heart says, then hey, I'm all for it. I'm very much for it.
Unified concept of jazz, which is about the philosophy. And the philosophy says everyone is included. And the philosophy says we must tolerate each other in order to listen to one another speak musically so that we can then go on a journey together and tell a story together. So we don't have time, right, to worry about which words you use. It's almost like two people arguing because, well, I speak street slang, and you speak the King's English or whatever, you know, and we got something to do over there, and we're arguing about the way we're talking to each other, rather than realizing that we're talking to each other. We need to talk about this issue, regardless of the King's English and my street slang. If we find that medium to communicate, then the job is done. Mission accomplished. The philosophy is communicating.
I think one of the biggest components of jazz is freedom. Freedom to be who you are. And, you know, a lot of people wonder about the state of jazz. Is it healthy? And I would have to say, yes, it is definitely strong. As long as the voice of freedom is around, it will always be jazz.
Seu olhar me fascina. Oh, como vivo a sofrer. Quase que eu disse agora o seu nome sem querer. Não quero que sombre toda essa gente. legal.